You ever wanted to go to war? You ever wondered what it's like to be a Viking? You ever wondered what it would have been like to live back in the early 11th century? Well, let me introduce you to a little series called Vinland Saga. That's right. I finally have gone through Vinland Saga. It's only been 2 seasons, but let me just say, as I've been stewing and just waiting to do this review, normally I finish the show and I sort of just jump into it like the next day normally and review it, but I've taken a couple days just to stew on it, and I'm glad I have, because if I initially made this review right after finishing season 2, I feel like I wouldn't have given it the justice it deserved. But as I've sat on it and sort of rewatched a lot of stuff and key moments, I think it might have broken top 10 for me. But before we get into all that, just what is Vinland Saga for those who are not familiar? When Vinland Saga begins, it starts out with this big battle between the Vikings and the English, as it follows this very skilled captain of the Vikings named Thors. And Thors, after engaging in this fight, he falls into the sea and decides to fake his own death, because he has decided that he's done with all this fighting and killing, since now he has a wife and a child of his own, and he abandons that whole life and flees to Iceland. He has a daughter and then a younger son, his daughter named Ylva and his son named Thorfinn. The story picks up, it's when Thorfinn is only 6 years old, and one of Thorfinn's old war buddies, Floki, discovers where he's living on Iceland. He comes to him and pretty much says, alright, our commander has ordered every single one of the Vikings to come together because we're going to war. And by every single one, he means every single one, which even though you've been a deserter for 15 years, it still means you. And he sort of just hints at just like, you know what, if you don't join, that's not gonna look good. You're gonna have to make an example of this village of what happens if you don't obey orders. So pretty much Thor's hand is forced and he goes to join the army. But Loki decides to take some revenge, and he hires this mercenary named Askeladd and tells him to kill Thors. And eventually the time comes when Askeladd is face to face with Thors. They have a pretty great fight. A very honorable man, Thors, and ultimately Thors defeats Askeladd, but he decides not to kill him because, again, he's decided to abandon that whole life. He doesn't need to kill. A warrior doesn't need a sword. And Askeladd admits just like, alright, you've won this fight, Thors. And then he orders his archers to shoot him, and then Thors dies right before Thorfinn's eyes. And Thorfinn, at the young age of 6, decides to follow Askeladd, just screaming and exclaiming every chance he gets that he will kill Askeladd and get revenge for his father. And throughout the early episodes, it's Thorfinn, he's alone in the woods for a while, training with his father's knife and constantly challenging Askeladd to duels, but of course he just keeps getting his ass beat. Though you figured Askeladd would have just killed the kid, but honestly you can tell he takes pity on him, because a cool thing during Thor and Askeladd's battle was that you could tell that Askeladd, he didn't want things to go as they did. Like even when it came to the point where one of Askeladd's men takes Thorfinn hostage to sort of leverage something against Thor's, there's a split second where you see Askeladd just frowning at it, but then he puts on the performance of, he's laughing and whatnot, which ties a lot into Askeladd's later characterization and stuff. The biggest thing with season 1 is that it's the prologue, but it's also the most hype as hell and awesome and epic prologue that's ever been made. Interestingly enough, I would honestly compare the progression of Vinland Saga to something like Fate. Fate Zero is a prologue as well. And then you get to the very end and it's like this big event that happens and it's like, oh, and then you go into Fate Stay 9 and it's like, oh, this is the real story. It was all just to get you to this one point. Really, the bulk of this review, we're going to be talking about 2 characters. That being the characters of Thorfinn and Askeladd, which really are the 2 major characters in this story. I mean, mainly in season 1. All of what I said pretty much is the first 4 episodes, which again is like the setup. But from this point on, we're going to delve into spoilers. I'm going to be talking about a lot. If you haven't yet watched Vinland Saga, do yourself a favor. I mean, it is a longer one, I will say. It's 48 episodes. Trust me when I say it's worth it. If you like action, if you like good stories, good characters, music, this show has it all. Without further ado, let's get into some spoilers. This section I'm going to try to divide solely season 1 and 2 because I do want to talk about those separately, which is why I said that we're going to be talking about mainly Askeladd and Thorfinn, because season 1 mainly revolves around Askeladd, because I know that is one of the bigger complaints that people have with mainly season 1 is the character of Thorfinn. Just because mainly he's just a chaos child. I've heard the thing where people don't like that he doesn't really develop in the first season, but again, that's mainly coming off of people who have only watched the anime and are only watching the anime. And I'm sure people who have read the manga only probably have felt the same way up to the point where we go from season 1 to season 2. Like, you could tell he doesn't really develop, but it's also because he's not really meant to. Because again, throughout all of season 1, he's so just focused on killing Askeladd, and that's his only purpose. That's all he does. Like, anytime he's with Askeladd, he's only ever focused on that one thing. And it's their relationship in season 1 that is the most fascinating to me, and why I honestly loved it, is the fact that Thorfinn, for 11 years, he sticks with Askeladd's men. And though he claims that, like, he doesn't follow him, he's not his boss, he still follows his orders, albeit with the caveat that he's always just like, if I do this, you will duel me. Which of course Askeladd agrees, because he's never worried about Thorfinn killing him. Just because mainly, one, he knows that he can still beat him in a one-on-one fight, but also just because he knows how to beat him. Before we get too much deeper into this, the biggest thing that I've just really been stewing on, and that I really didn't get going through it the first time, which is honestly how I knew that I really loved this show, is the fact that I almost immediately went back through it again. I mean, not like full-on rewatched it again, but, you know, went to like some of those key points from the very beginning to the end again and was like, yes, it's a show that definitely works once you get to the end. You can benefit through rewatching it again than knowing everything, because then you look back on it all and you see that it's not that so much was seeded from the very beginning, but there's stuff that comes back in subtle ways. Everything that Thors talks to Thorfinn about in like the first couple episodes, about a true warrior doesn't need a sword, and just the whole thing about like you have no enemies, which again is like the biggest thing going from the first couple episodes of season 1 to the last couple episodes of season 2, and even the stuff with Askeladd. There's really only 2 stories that are happening in season 1, and the majority of the focus is on one of the stories, and that is Askeladd's relationship. I mean, this word sounds bad obviously in a modern context, but he's trying to groom Canute into being a king, a proper king. Like, it's from that point on, like when he sees how Canute conducts himself, like he's just a very passive, just shy prince, and how he has Ragnar just talk for him because he's just so scared. But at the same time, like Askeladd, he sees something in Canute. Like he talks to Bjorn at one point. There's something about that kid that makes me want to follow him. And honestly, just looking at the whole context of the story, it's probably something that ties back to how Askeladd and like his whole story about how he's a descendant of King Arthur, Artorias. Maybe there was like some part of him that when he sees Canute that he understood what his mother was talking about that whole time. Just like how he went about just trying to cultivate Canute's kingship. I mean, the biggest step he takes early on is killing Ragnar, which was fucked up at the time, but like seeing where Canute ultimately ends up, it's something that needed to happen. I mean, Ragnar was that father figure to Canute because, you know, Canute's actual father was a dick, but it was more than just that Ragnar was his father figure. He was also just so protective of him as well. He always was speaking for Canute, never really letting Canute speak for himself. And so Askeladd saw that and it's just like, in order for the king to grow, you need to be gone. It's that section of episodes in which you sort of realize it's like, Askeladd, I mean, obviously, from the very beginning it's obvious, it's like, he's no hero. Really, in season 1, there is no protagonist. I mean, in the literal storytelling aspect, yes, like Askeladd, Thorfinn, and all them are the protagonists. Because again, you're seeing the story from their perspective. Because really, it's in that section of the story, you could really see it as Thorkel and his gang are more the good guys than Askeladd and his crew. Askeladd and his gang, they're Vikings. It's like they go through these villages, they raid them, they pillage. But I mean, it also ties into Askeladd as well in that he actually hates them, like his whole crew. It's the fact that he himself, even though he's put on the act that he's a Viking, but he's Welsh. And it's when he gets to the point during that whole Thorkel arc where he finally like says it to his men. It's just like, you know what, this whole time I've hated all of you. And then he just like starts killing them. And it's like, fuck, man. Like you really start to see his true colors. It's rewatching that section of episodes. It's from like episode 10 to 20 when Thorkel really comes into play, which again, if I really had to pick like an overall favorite character, honestly, it would have to be Thorkel. Askeladd is like my favorite character, but just in terms of, the comedy relief, but also just like the bombastic nature of Thorkel. Like my favorite line from him still is when he's talking to Floki and he's just like, it doesn't make sense that you would side with the English, it's like they're weaker. Like if you side with us, like, there's guaranteed victory, but Thorkel's just like, you're right. It would make more sense to side with you guys because you guys will definitely be the winners, but I only care about having a good fight. So for me, it makes more sense to side with the underdogs because that means I'll have the harder fight. It's just Thorkel. He's so fucking insane and awesome and just so massive. And also just like his relationship with Thorfinn as well. Just like from their first fight where like Thorfinn stabs his hand and like cuts off his fingers and it's just like he doesn't even care about that. He's just like, oh, that was a good fight. I want to fight you again. But then obviously that leads into their round 2, which, oh, such a good fight. I know I'm like jumping all around with stuff. There's so many different characters I want to talk about, but it's interesting in Thorfinn and Thorkel's fight because, I mean, it's safe to assume if that fight went all the way uninterrupted by anybody, Thorkel would have defeated Thorfinn eventually. It is kind of interesting how he's ultimately defeated because it literally is David and Goliath. Because, I mean, again, the whole David and Goliath thing is, David super small, Goliath fucking massive, but he just throws one stone and hits him like in the head and then he dies. I mean, Thorkel doesn't die, but like it's similar in that sense where Askeladd, he helps Thorfinn fight, where it's just like there was a battle I took place in a long time ago where I fought, it was only for a moment, but I saw Thorkel the Invincible fall. And it was just that thing where it's like he shined the light in his eyes. He shined the light in his eyes, but then also Thorfinn kicked him, so it was just like his dizziness. That was also awesome as well, just having Thorfinn and Askeladd fight together in their own way. Which is also that scene like when Thorfinn has his arm broken and Askeladd is just like, let me look at it. He's like, just leave me alone. He's like, just let me help you. Just that bickering. It's just those moments where you realize that Thorfinn obviously will never admit it to himself, but Askeladd was a father figure in his own way. I mean, it's more in the ending where, that's kind of solidified, but we'll get to that in a moment. That was an interesting thing to revisit as well, was the scene where Canute and the priest are talking while Bjorn is going all berserker. Was just that conversation of what love really means, what real love looks like, and how that was ultimately the conversation that just snapped Canute out of his own trance. Like the priest said, I've just witnessed a miracle. Canute like immediately flips from being that passive, just shy character to just intensive leader. And it's cool, like when Askeladd sees that as well, he immediately switches to kneeling before him and even giving him his sword, just like, I killed Ragnar, kill me. But if you don't kill me, I can help you take the throne. That was one scene, like when I first watched it, where I was just like, that happened kind of fast, just because I thought like the reveal that Askeladd was the one who really killed Ragnar was going to be more of a bigger reveal to Canute. But then of course, once you get to the end, it's like, oh, okay, it all kind of circles back in its own way. We have a lot to talk about, so I'm just going to jump to the end of season 1, which is where Askeladd's whole plan really starts to come to fruition. It's not until he comes face to face with the king, once the king starts to learn more and more about Askeladd, and it's when they have that conversation in the dining hall and he's giving out the gifts, and then he starts talking about just like Wales. We will destroy the Welsh. The only good things that they produce as slaves, will take them over. And of course, Askeladd, of course, being Welsh, like he says, like that's his home. And I just love that scene, like you seeing in his mind just like, okay, how do I stop this? Like, do I just start a revolt with the king? Like, and then just like he has that moment just like, stop trying to think of solutions that involve just fighting, or that involve just like getting Canute involved. And then he just goes face to face with the king and is just like, fuck it, and just cuts his head off. And it's like, and then he just starts going ape shit on all the guards and everything, and it's just like, yes, look at me, I am the true king of Britannia and all this. It's insane. And again, you look at it all, like once you get to the end, it's like, it made sense. That was the only way to save both Canute and Wales, because that's what the king says, just like, Canute or Wales, pick one. But of course Askeladd's like, no, fuck you, I pick both. And it's good that Canute picks up on it, because like as soon as Askeladd does that, he's just like, he killed the king, kill him. And then ultimately it's Canute who deals the killing blow to Askeladd, right as fucking Thorfinn comes in as well. It's crazy because, I mean, you really look at all of season 1, this only really was ever gonna end with Askeladd's death in one way or another. But like as you got more and more towards the end, especially when we had that episode when, Askeladd fights Bjorn and puts him down, and then he starts talking about like his life and how he tells Thorfinn the ultimate way you should kill someone you hate. It was from that point on when I realized I don't feel like Thorfinn is gonna be the one, nor should he really be the one who should kill him. The last words like Askeladd just gives to Thorfinn is just so good. I mean, it was sad as well because, I mean, you look at Thorfinn, it's like for these last 11 plus years, he's devoted himself to killing this man no matter what. Thorfinn's just holding his body just like, fucking duel me right now. Like, I need to kill you. But just like that part of Askeladd, it's also just like, I've made you wait long enough. I give you my life. But of course, Thorfinn's just like, I need to fight you, like, come on. It's so beautiful as well, that shot of like Thorfinn holding Askeladd, and it's just like it's like in the same style as the last shot of Thor's when, you know, he has all the arrows in him. It's like that same lighting, that same color. And Thorfinn, obviously, again, both Thorfinn and Askeladd, neither of them will ever admit it to themselves or each other. It was a father-son dynamic in a weird, twisted way. And that's why I've seen many videos talking about just that one scene, how it was one of the best scenes. I mean, it is. It actually, just looking at the whole season 1, just how that ends. Thorfinn beating Askeladd in a duel never would have been a satisfying end to Askeladd's character, or even Thorfinn's character. Like, even in that scene, if Thorfinn actually decided to take his knife and stab Askeladd in that moment, it wouldn't have felt earned. It wouldn't have felt justified. Then ultimately Askeladd dies. And this is where I feel like the author could have made a choice with how he chose to keep the story going. Like, Canute immediately, he starts talking to Thorfinn, is just like, I'm sorry, I know you wanted to kill him, but stuff happened, like it had to end this way. And then Thorfinn, he attacks Canute and he slashes his face a little bit. I was concerned. Then going into season 2, I was like, don't shift your revenge, please. As much as I wanted to see Thorfinn continuously go on this righteous rampage, there was that part of me that was just like, don't have it be just a continuous thing of like, you denied me my revenge, now I'm gonna kill the person who killed my father. Because I mean, there kind of is a what if thing there. It's like, what if Thorfinn actually did kill Canute in that moment? I mean, it's safe to assume Thorfinn would have then just died, because there would have been no one to call off, like, don't kill Thorfinn other than Thorkel. But I feel like then Thorkel would have had to like die in that moment too. But then just the ultimate like symbolic ending, I would say, is when they're taking Thorfinn away, and then like he's reaching out to Askeladd's body, and he reaches out with his father's knife and he drops it. He lets go of it, and then he's still like reaching out to him. So in so many different ways, that was him letting go of both Askeladd and his father. Because as the knife's falling, you see in the reflection just like the flashes of just Thorfinn's whole life up to that point. Everything he's done with that knife, you know, the amount of people he's killed. And then it just ends. You see flashes of some characters who, like, at the time I was just like, who the fuck are these people? It's because those are characters that will then appear in season 2 and play big roles. And just having the title of the last episode of season 1 being called The End of the Prologue is perfect. Because now we'll talk about season 2. All I'm gonna say is, if you at all were disappointed with season 2, or if you dropped it at any point, you did not understand what this show is about. Because I've seen many videos, I didn't watch them, but I've seen the thumbnails of people being like, season 2 of Vinland Saga is horrible, or just like Vinland Saga as a whole. If you liked this season, or if you didn't drop it, you wasted your time. All I'm saying is, those people are fools, and they don't understand anything about storytelling, and they didn't truly understand that season 1 wasn't the story. Season 2 is the true chapter 1. All of season 1 really was chapter 0. It's chapter 1 for Thorfinn's character. Because again, season 1 entirely was Askeladd mainly, and also Canute as well. When I say Askeladd, it's more Askeladd and Canute, that story. But season 2, the Farmland Saga. I have to give, honestly, the biggest respect to the author, Makoto Yukimura. I can see the choice that could have been made coming off of season 1. He could have had it be that Thorfinn continues his just killing and rampage and shifting his revenge to now trying to kill Canute. But no, season 2, it completely changes the story. And honestly, there's a world in which maybe you could watch season 2 without watching season 1. Like, watch season 2 first and watch season 1. I'm sure there's some people who I say that and they're just like, what the fuck are you saying? But let me cook. Where season 2 goes with stuff pretty much entirely focuses on Thorfinn. He's not the main character, or at the very least, he's not the only main character. It's Thorfinn and the slave Einar, and how it's ultimately his relationship and ultimate friendship with Einar over the course of season 2 that truly changes Thorfinn. And season 2 was the ultimate development for Thorfinn that, like, people watching season 1 wanted and were missing from Thorfinn. It's that idea of Askeladd is gone now, so where does Thorfinn go? You know, the last couple words that Askeladd said to Thorfinn is just like, once I'm gone, where are you going to go? And then like how he ultimately says them is just like, become the true warrior, Thorfinn, son of Thor. He had faith in him that he would ultimately find his own way. Just the entirety of season 2, it takes place on this farm, which is the farm of this man named Ketil, whatever. You know, he runs this big plot of land, it's a farm, and it's following the story of Einar, who's a slave. His family and everybody was killed by Vikings. He ultimately gets bought by this man Ketil, and then he's working on this farm, and then he's like, all right, and here's gonna be the person who's going to help you, like, chop down all these trees. And then Thorfinn walks out, and it's like, oh man. Because, I mean, it's revealed later, but after the end of season 1, because Thorfinn, he attacked the king, you know, that should have been cause for death. Canute puts Thorfinn into slavery at one point, and he's, you know, he eventually ends up on this farm. Thorfinn, he grows closer with Einar, and just like how they talk to each other, they go through all these trials, just being a slave, and just everything that Thorfinn grapples with. Again, I'm sure there was many points, because I think it's like 4 years that's jumped between season 1 and 2. I'm sure there was many points where Thorfinn probably considered killing himself, but it's this season ultimately where the words of his father ultimately all come back. A true warrior doesn't need a sword. You have no enemies, Thorfinn. You don't need to kill. Because you really look at, say, your own life, for example. You listen to like some of these words and advice that your parents give you when you're a kid. At the time, you're just like, you kind of brush it off. As a kid, you think you know better. As a kid, as a teenager, and then there's these moments that'll hit you in life, and then suddenly those words will come back to you. And then you realize just like, oh, my parents knew what they were talking about. What the hell? You don't realize it until you hit those moments in life. And that's ultimately Thorfinn's whole development in season 2, is that he finally is starting to realize what his father was talking about. It ties back to also the conversation that Thorfinn and Thorkel had when they fought. Just like, what is it that we're missing that's gonna make us true warriors? What is it that Thor's found? Like, cause you could see it as a thing, it's just like, oh, Thor's like, he gave up fighting and whatnot. It's just like, cause, you know, he had a family and whatnot. Like, he feared losing that, which, I mean, he did, definitely, but just like that idea of what it means to be a true warrior, it's not knowing how to fight, it's not knowing how to kill. Honestly, in the words of Gandalf from the first Hobbit movie,
true courage is about knowing not when to take a life, but when to spare one.
Again, I know those are two different things, but it's like the same sentiment. Thorfinn in season 2, ultimately, he comes to that decision, and like, and when he's talking to Einar, he makes an oath with both him and himself, just like, I will never resort to violence as a first method. I'll never take a life again. And it's just, it's so good, man. I know there's so many people who look at season 2 and just like, what the fuck is this? And that's why I just will say, you don't understand what this story was about. If you watched season 2 and dropped it, or just thought it was bad and just like, you never saw it through to the end, like, it's one of the best stories I think I've experienced in a while. I know it's simple, but I don't know, it just hit me so hard. It's kind of like breaking the fourth wall in its own way, and how going from season 1, you're expecting that kind of tone and action throughout the rest of the story. But then again, you go to season 2 and that part of the story and you realize, oh no, that's not what this story is. And now I know that there is more of the manga. I know that the manga isn't finished yet either. I mean, one thing I also forgot to talk about with season 2 is it's the ultimate building and development of two characters, Thorfinn and Canute, and how you ultimately see how Askeladd rubbed off on them in different ways, and how when those two finally come face to face at the very end of season 2, that conversation between those two is awe-inspiring. When Canute hears like the name Thorfinn, it's like, oh, Thorfinn's here, and he touches his scar, just like, I remember Thorfinn, he's here to kill me. I don't want him near me at all. But then once those two finally are face to face with each other, like, Canute immediately sees just like, yeah, these years have changed you, huh? And then just like as he speaks, just like his tone of voice and just how he's talking about, just like, just leave this farm alone. I'm going to build a place in which people who are oppressed by people like you and rulers like you. I'm gonna go to Vinland. I'm gonna give this haven for these people. And just like that part where it's like, and if you try to stop me, and then Canute's just like, he's gonna say he's gonna kill me. Oh God. And then he's just like, I'll run. Canute's just like, you're just gonna run? That shot, that line of just, I have no enemies at all. That's the ultimate just full circle story, man. And how just that conversation, it changed Canute as well, because then Canute, he leaves and then he decides to disband like his army and whatnot, and just like, I don't want to make more work for Thorfinn. And just that ending. All I'll say is, I know there's more, and I've heard from many people, it gets crazy, it gets insane, there's more good shit to come. But the way I personally look at it, where season 2 ends, for the anime at the very least, because the manga of course can keep going, and I'll probably delve into it at some point because I do honestly want to see where the story ends up. But in terms of just a full just conclusion and storytelling perspective, the package of season 1 and 2, I think it can just end here. But if the anime and the people at Mappa, because honestly Mappa has their hands full now, if Mappa just decides and the studios decide to just not make any more, I'd be perfectly fine. Because again, where this story ends for Thorfinn's character, it's the ultimate development. Because like then he also goes back to Iceland, he sees his mom and his sister again, he tells them about like what he's gonna do, he's gonna go to Vinland, we're gonna just create this haven in space, this world beyond the sea that people can escape to. It's just a beautiful story. Going from the very beginning, the lines from his father, you have no enemies. Thorfinn living his whole life of killing, just destroying, wanting revenge, and then having his revenge taken from him, and then just having to live from that point on. And just his interactions with Einar and realizing just what life can be, and just ending with that thing of, I have no enemies at all. For me as a writer as well, seeing this whole story, just in the themes and everything it tells, it's the perfect ending. Because I mean, you could also just sort of see just like where that story's gonna go. It's like, yeah, there's still gonna be more hardship and war and whatnot. The Thorfinn that we see in season 1 will most likely never be seen again. Or at the very least, never in his full glory. Man. This is a series that I definitely could continuously talk about for a while, because it just made me think so much. Again, that's why I'm glad I didn't immediately jump into reviewing, because I don't think I would have probably rated it as high as I would have. It's also the fact that I'm not immediately jumping into watching anything else, really, just because I want to keep stopping and thinking about this. Oh yeah, also just, I never really praised it, but just from like the production side of things. The music is fucking great. Again, a meme I've talked about with many shows, it's like, if there's that one theme that I'll continuously listen to, chances are, yeah, it's really good. And there was that one theme, which here, I'll play a snippet of it right now. It's the theme of the Troll, which it first plays when Thorders is like fighting Askeladd's men, and it plays for many other points. I see it more as kind of Thorkel's theme, because like it played a lot for like when his army was just like charging and whatnot. All the other themes and music as well is so good, just because they gave that sense of like the Vikings, just like that time period and war, like a lot of brass instruments and good string work, and then the voice acting as well. Of course, it is kind of funny, like the English and Norway and, you know, Vikings and all that, so it's interesting just hearing them speak in Japanese, especially when there's points when there's like a language barrier with two characters, even though they're both speaking Japanese, which is why it's interesting. This had a lot of potential to have a really good English dub. I mean, from the research I've done, like for season 1 at least, there's the 2 different dubs, because, you know, Funimation did their dub, which of course has a lot of iconic voices, but there was also another dub which was done by Sentai, I think, which from the clips and whatnot I've heard, it tried to go for a more authentic sounding dub, kind of having the characters sound more what they maybe would have sounded like. I don't know, just like some of the dub stuff I've listened to, I'm just like, some of these voices don't fit. It's just like the Japanese, like voices, they were fucking phenomenal, especially like, you know, Thorfinn's voice, Askeladd's voice, Thorkel's voice, like they're all so good, especially again going from season 1 where Thorfinn's like screaming constantly, and then season 2 where he's so much calmer and just like focused. And then the animation and art was astounding as well. It is Mappa, but I kind of forgot it was Mappa, just because, I mean, of course the Mappa we're so used to now is the Mappa who does shit like Jujutsu Kaisen and Chainsaw Man, so it mainly was in like season 1 where it was just like you could tell. But either way, what am I going to give for a score for Vinland Saga? Overall, I mean, safe to assume I never gave one negative, so 10 out of 10. Vinland Saga, man, holy. There legit is not one thing I can think of that I would fault it for, other than like when you're first watching it. I mean, it depends on what kind of person you are, but when you're first watching it, I don't know, I feel like you have such a high expectation for it. Just know that if you're going into it expecting like bombastic action and blood, I mean, you'll definitely get that in season 1, but that's not what the whole show is about. This is honestly the kind of show where you definitely can see what kind of person you are. Are you the kind of person who watches stuff for good action and animation and whatnot, or are you the kind of person who wants a good story? If you're the kind of person who likes good action and animation, you'll like season 1. If you're the kind of person who likes a good story, you'll like all of it. This has been my long review of Vinland Saga. There was a part of me that was like, maybe I should have reacted to it on the channel, but I don't know. I don't feel like I would have done it justice at the time. But if there is more Vinland Saga anime to come in the future, maybe I'll visit it on the channel, because I think that would be fun. Either way, thank you all for joining me on this review of Vinland Saga. Join me for many other videos of the sort, be they future reviews, reaction, gameplay, and everything else that'll be coming out soon. So thank you all for joining me on this. I'm Lancer. Thanks for watching.